Good day and welcome to our explanation and demonstration of how to set up a full lab inside the Microsoft Azure cloud. We're going to create an account, we're going to create a Windows 2019 server, upgrade it to a domain controller, we're going to set up a Windows 10 PC, we're going to set up Bastion, we're going to tighten up the firewall, we're going to go over a whole bunch of little bits that you need to know as well. We have a full video with all 6 items together, that's about 50 minutes long, but what we're going to do here is break this into segments for you. This is segment 2 of 6. So normally the first thing you'd need to do in Azure is set up what's called a resource group, which is just a collection of things, virtual machines, virtual networks, web apps, so on and so forth. It's really a way for Microsoft to put all of the stuff you're doing in one place. However, to make this faster, they've set it up so you can build them on the fly. So let's do that. So the first thing we're actually going to build is a virtual machine. Straight to virtual machine. We'll create a new virtual machine down here. And we're going to use our free trial subscription. We need a resource group, as I was just mentioning. Let's click Create New. We'll create one called Test RG1. There we go. And a virtual machine name. I'm going to call the virtual machine Test DC1. And because I'm located in Calgary, I would prefer to use US West 2, which is located in Washington State. Central US is, I think, Wyoming or Chicago, one of the two. They're, the US West 1, well, the one without a number beside it is California, LA in particular. But you can choose whatever's closest to you. Only use the recommended ones. The ones that are down here have limited services. So let's go. I don't need infrastructure redundancy, so when Microsoft needs to pull a plug on something, I guess I'm just going to go down. Now, what type of server do I want? I want to choose a Windows Server 2019 data center. A Spot instance. This is really, really cool. However, it doesn't work right now because we're in the middle of COVID. I'll take a second to explain it. So, spot pricing is similar to what Amazon does. And what it's saying, the idea behind it is that Microsoft has very large data centers and they're not 100% subscribed. So if you can tolerate having your machine taken down at any time at all for any reason by Microsoft, such as a lab, well, then a Spot instance is for you. And what it will do is Microsoft will store this in their data center, in whichever data center you've selected, in the unused portion of the data center that people are not subscribing to. So if they've got 90% full, this is a way for them to jam it up. So I'll show you this very quickly. I'll click yes here, and then I will click change size, and you'll see the dramatic price savings here. So 91% savings, 84% savings. These are huge. However, I can tell you right now, after working with Microsoft on this forever, I cannot find a data center anywhere in the world on any service that is taking spot pricing at this minute. So I'll click select here just to get back out. But I'm going to have to choose no on spot pricing, and I'll have to choose an actual size. So I will click here and click change size. Now, having played with this for a few weeks now, I can tell you that trying to run off of 1 CPU and 1 gig of RAM is cheap, but it's unusable. So you're going to need to at least get to this to make it functional. You just can't live without 2 cores. So what you can do, however, in the future to reduce cost, if you're putting this into production, is to set it up with the higher core count and higher memory, and then drop it down later. But because this is going to be a domain controller, I think we'd agree that 2 CPUs and 4 gig of RAM is pretty small anyway. So let's click on that. And notice that that's an estimated cost. It depends on how much time you actually use. So this is what I'm going to choose. 2 CPUs, 4 cores. Generally, you'd want to choose something with a D before it. D is Microsoft's higher grade. You can find an explanation as to what these different codes mean, but you'll see that 2 CPUs with 4 gig of RAM and a max IOPS of 1280, well, but I can get that down here for 2 gigs and, well, let's go with two CPUs and 8 gig, and it's, more than double the performance. Well, it's not just from the memory, it's because this is a D category. The D is better than the B. Anyway, for what I'm doing, I don't care. I'm just going to select B. So let's go. Now I need to set a username. So I'm going to go with Set a password I can remember. Now, inbound port rules. So this is asking, look, do you want just to play with this in a lab inside of Azure, or do you want to be able to remote to this from outside of Azure? So I'm going to show you, we'll leave it on right now as leaving port 3389 turned on, but generally you'll want to turn that off. And I'll explain that in a little bit so you'll understand it. So do I have a Windows Server license? Yes, because I'm a TechNet member, I do already have a license. If you don't, they'll sell you one, so you're on your way. But I'm going to say, yes, I do. They don't validate it, by the way, so let's just move on. I'm going to click. And for a lab, the worst it would do is come up and tell you you've got 30 days to activate. So I don't care for my lab. So let's click next. Now, note when I click next, all I'm doing is rolling through these items at the top. So let's explain a few things. This is the type of disk. Most people for a lab would probably choose standard hard disk. However, if you choose the premium, of course, it's much faster, and you can get benchmarks on that. Microsoft does make them available to show you how much faster. So I'm going to leave it at premium SSD, and let's click next and go to networking. Now in here, you can see it's going to set up a nice new virtual network for me. It's going to give me a nice new subnet of 10.0. It's going to set up a public address for me, which is wonderful. It's asking me about security. It's asking me about load balancing. All of these things are fine, just click next. Now, practically speaking, you could just click review and create. But there is one thing I'd like to change here. So let's go click management, enable auto shutdown. I'm going to do that because I do want it to shut down after 7 p.m. because I don't want to get billed for it. So let's shut it down and let's click next here. So I suppose there are two changes I would like to make. One is that management where I'd like it to shut down, which we could change afterwards. All of these things can be changed afterwards, well, virtually all of them. So one of the things that can't be changed, however, is Generation 1, Generation 2. You want to choose a Generation 2 VM if you have the option to do so. We can explain why. I'll put up on the screen here some of the advantages, but it boils down to they're better, they don't cost you anymore, not a penny, so just change off to a VM2. Tags are for billing, for your internal billing system. Most people don't use them, especially for labs, but you certainly can. I click next, and it will run through a validation. And if I've checked spot pricing, at this point, it would tell me to get lost because there's nothing available, which is annoying that it shows that it's available, but actually isn't. Just frustrating. Okay, so validation passed. There's all the details. I'm going to click create. Now you'll notice at the top here, there's a little bell that tells us what the status is. There we go. And now it's going to show a longer list than you might expect of the various devices virtual devices that it's adding. We're going to speed through this so you don't have to waste your time watching it. Note that you can click on these and bring up details without blowing things up. So there's some details. So you'll notice things like, well, status created, isn't that done? No, until it says okay, it's not done. So when I click here, you can see the status is okay. When I click here, the status says created. So no, it's not done. You can see it's still working. Yay, so it's done. That took about 2 minutes to complete. So at this point, I now want to get to it. So I can go to the resource that I just created, but this will get a little confusing. So what I want to do is take you out and take you right back in. So I could just click connect at this point, and I'll get to that. But let me just show you how you get to this from the home page now. So in here, you'll see I've got this recent resources that I've just been working on, and I could go in and look at my various other features. But I can just go straight to virtual machines. It'll take me right back to where I was. There's the DC that I just created, which, by the way, isn't a DC yet. Right now, it's just a server. And what I want to do, you'd think, is click connect. And if I click connect, selecting from RDP, it's going to give me an external address. So I can connect to this machine, this virtual machine that's inside of Azure, that's currently labeled DC1, but it's not actually a domain controller yet. Right now, it's just a server that hasn't even been set up. I connect to it through RDP. So let's do that. Download the RDP file, and all it's doing is putting this together for you. I'll launch it and you'll see. So it says, hey, are you sure you want to be able to connect to this? And all it's going to do is open an RDP session for me using the IP address. You can see right here that Microsoft says is the public address for it. So just going to sign in. Yep. And this is what you're expecting, right? Standard remote desktop stuff. So because we're here, let's configure it a bit. So the very first thing you want to do is patch it, just like a physical box. There we go. It's already got a few patches waiting. That's good. Server Manager, of course, starts automatically. So we'll do some basic configuration while we're here. I'll click Local Server. I've already got the Windows updates running. Real-time protection, sure it's antivirus. I like to bump up the diagnostics, so I always change them to full. Enhanced security makes me crazy. I'm going to turn that off. And the very first product I'm going to install is Credge, which we'll show you in a second, but really not important. I'm going to set my time zone. Now, Internet Explorer is pretty insecure. Chrome is not. Well, it's got its problems, but Credge is really the best thing to go. So Credge is just Microsoft Edge that's running on Chrome. So if you just search for Credge, you'll find it. I'd suggest you download and install it. Certainly not a requirement. If you don't wish to, don't bother. If you're screaming at the screen right now saying, I like Firefox or I like Opera, fine, good for you. Do what you want. But I like this. Okay, so that's running. Let's see what the updates are. You can see this is pretty responsive. Okay, so that is ready to go. It's just waiting for this this patch to finish. Okay, while we're waiting, let's show you Task Manager. And you can see in Performance, I can right-click and I can... Okay, well, apparently I can't. We have to wait for this to finish. Actually, I'll just bring this back up. Right-click and I can select Logical Processors, and you can see I've got two. See my memories being used. Yeah, so it's a pretty decent, it's an acceptable machine. Let's go from there, get started, confirm. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to restart. Please watch our next segment.